For the last couple of weeks, I've been obsessed with the way people try to prove a point. The point could be pretty much anything.
A new study shows how sugar might fuel the growth of cancer.
And it can get as weird as they want.
A new study suggests hugging your dog is bad for your dog.
Scientists say smelling farts might prevent cancer.
But more often than not, they all eventually end up saying the same thing.
Research.
Doing the research.
Cancer research.
And after noticing this pattern over and over again, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I mean, how many of these research papers can we actually trust?
Doctors don't make decisions about your health based on what we think is best. We make decisions that the research tells us.
I changed and invented research data. I'm committed scientific fraud.
What's going wrong with scientific research?
So for days, I've really been trying to figure this out. That if research is the reason that we believe these claims, then who's making sure that the research itself is actually true? What happens if the claims that we're supposed to trust turn out to be wrong?
सिर्फ हॉर्लिक्स में है न्यूट्री अब्सॉर्ब साइंस के साथ 23 वाइटल न्यूट्रिएंट्स जो बढ़ाए दूध की शक्ति।
डेयरी मिल्क मुझे टॉलर बनाती है, हॉर्लिक्स मुझे टॉलर, स्ट्रॉन्गर, शार्पर बनाए। It's proven.
टॉलर और स्ट्रॉन्गर और शार्पर।
Now, I want to bring this up because I believed this ad since it was clinically proven. And you can see it here too. It says, study by NIN Hyderabad on micronutrient-enriched beverage on 869 school children. So I was wondering, what if I went and found that study myself? At first, I couldn't find much. Nothing I could trace back to a published paper. But eventually, I found the same study referenced on Unilever's website. And this is what it says. Horlicks conducted a clinical study with 869 school children of a certain age group, and after 14 months of supplementation, Horlicks, compared to others, showed significant growth. And this was the published paper. But as I went through it, there was no mention of Horlicks. Instead, I found this article interview with the former deputy director and head of the clinical division of NIN Hyderabad. The growth mentioned in the study was not primarily because of any micronutrient beverage like Horlicks. It was because of milk. And I noticed something else too. The study had been funded by GlaxoSmithKline, the same company that owned Horlicks at that time. And it made me wonder how often this keeps happening.
In a repeated national survey, doctors in all branches of medicine, doctors in all parts of the country were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" Once again, the brand named most was Camel.
More than 100 years ago, cigarette companies were doing the same thing. They were paying doctors to promote cigarettes.
More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette.
But it's not just about false advertisement. No, that is the least problematic part. There is something else scientists today are worried about.
The data appears to have been fabricated, has been made up. Like these patients never existed. They made some photos in some lab and then they sold to people who weren't involved in the research because the research never happened.
These fake studies are being pushed into legitimate journals on the internet by a big, massive network of people who have figured out a way to make money off of it.
It's something to be very afraid of. We've seen cases where, in the worst case, fake papers have made it into even patient guidelines.
Now, I know this might sound boring. I mean, they're research papers after all. Who cares about them? But I'm convinced this is one of those areas where a big reason why companies are able to make billions of dollars is only because we don't care about it. We think it's boring. So for the last few weeks, I've been talking to experts and I've been trying to understand how this entire system works. Who runs these networks? Who writes these fake papers? Who publishes them? And more importantly, could someone like me, with absolutely no research background, get a fake scientific paper published?
Most people who work in science are working as hard as they can. They are working as long as they can in terms of the hours they're putting in. They're often going beyond their own physical limits, and they're working as smart as they can. And so if you're doing all those things, what else can you do to get an edge, to get ahead, to be the person who crosses the finish line first? All you can do is cut corners. That's the only option left to you.
Okay, so I wanted to begin with understanding how these networks target their clients. Who do they ask and what do they promise? And after looking for a while, I found that these networks are called paper mills. You'd imagine it to be some small group of scammers that are working in some shady office, but that's not how they work. Instead, they operate remotely from everywhere around India, relying on the connections that they have built in the scientific community over the years.
So paper mills are sort of an industry that helps scientists have better resumes by adding their names on papers they didn't write themselves.
Now, these paper mills mostly target PhD scholars, students who are there in their final years of PhD, those who are just about to graduate. And the reason is, to get a degree, every PhD scholar needs to submit a thesis. The thesis they submit is built over the research work that they have done and the papers that they have published in a good reputed journal. But getting a paper published is not an easy job.
So when I was doing my PhD, it took me 1 year just to understand the problem statement. You don't even start contributing to research at that point. And then you try to, develop your own idea, you try out different methods, and then, you achieve something that, hey, this is interesting. That is when you first write your research paper. So generally it takes about 1 year, 1.5 years.
So a lot of these scholars are already looking for a way out, trying to find someone who can do it for them. And that is where these paper mills come in. Now, I wanted to see if I could find any of these paper mills. So I started looking around and it's been literally only 5 minutes for me. I already see one. This is a paper mill. Contrary to what I expected, they're not difficult to find at all. In fact, they're not even trying to hide, which is surprising to me because aren't they afraid of getting caught? I noticed that often these paper mills advertise themselves on various platforms such as Facebook groups, Telegram, WhatsApp channels, but they won't call themselves paper mills.
But they say something like, we are looking for co-authorships. Or do you want to publish a paper in that and that journal? We can help you with that. It's not openly showing you the scam.
And it's not just the PhD students they target. They're also targeting faculties, professors, sometimes clinicians, because in science, you build your career based on how many papers you have published and also how much of these other researchers have found useful, or in other words, how many citations does a paper have. So they have this huge market to exploit and milk their money from. But then you'd ask, how would anyone find the papers useful if they were never real? Like, who would even cite them? We'll get to that later, but right now, I want to check, can I, with no research background, also take help from them to write a research paper under my name? I wanted to talk to them to understand what all they offer. They asked me a couple of questions like what domain I work in, what's my topic, other similar questions to get to know me better. But after a while, weirdly, they stopped texting all of a sudden. And they later blocked me as well. I still wanted to find a way to see if I can get a paper written for myself. But the problem was, I didn't know much about how writing or publishing a research paper actually works. So I emailed a couple of experts who've been working for 8 to 10 years, cracking down on these fraudulent paper mills to understand how they operate and what gaps in the system they exploit.
Anybody can go on Facebook. That's how I see them. I found them.
These people are called science sleuths, like Dr. Achal here, who's the founder of India Research Watch, an organization that investigates scientific misconduct in India, and Dr. Elizabeth Bick, a renowned science whistleblower who has helped expose thousands of problematic research papers, leading to more than 1,200 retractions. And it's because of them, paper mills are often suspicious of who they are interacting with. If a paper mill representative feels that the person at the other end is only pretending to be interested in their services, they will stop engaging with them. And that's probably also the reason why they blocked me out. So that just means one thing. Before I get on a call with them, I need to understand everything about how a paper is published. Okay, this is what I've learned. For a research paper to get published, the author who writes the paper has to submit it to the editor. The editor is the main link between the author, reviewer, and the journal, and he's the one communicating with all three of them. The editor assesses the paper, and based on the assessment, he will reject or approve it for peer review, where an expert evaluates the paper, flags what's wrong, and sends it over for revisions. In an ideal setting, these peer reviewers are anonymous, and the back and forth collaboration with them is what makes research credible. And since we're talking about collaboration anyways, it's a perfect segue to talk about our partner for this video, Zoho Workplace, and more specifically the tool that I love the most, which is Zoho Writer. When I'm working on a script like this with my team, every edit is color-coded and attributed, and I can see who changed what, when, and why. I can accept or reject each suggestion, log sections I don't want touched, and the full version history is there if needed to undo anything. No more 20 email attachments named Final V3. Just one live document where the review process is actually visible. It even has a built-in plagiarism checker, which is kind of ironic given what we've been talking about, but genuinely useful when you want to make sure your writing is original before it goes out. Writer is just one of the 9 apps inside Zoho Workplace. Emails, file management, chat, video conferencing, spreadsheets, presentations, all of them are in one suite, made and hosted in India. If you're already on Google Workspace or Microsoft 365, you don't have to switch overnight because Zoho's hybrid setup lets you run both side by side and migrate at your own pace. Check out Zoho Workplace, linked in the description. Now back to the video. Okay, once all the revisions are made, the paper is then sent to the journal to get published.
And so there's many ways they can cheat. So for example, fake peer reviewers. Basically, they might set up a Gmail account that actually leads back either to the author or to the paper miller. Another way is designing papers with experiments that never happened. Like you can come up with one experiment where you test some compound against a cancer cell, let's say colon cancer. But if you change colon cancer to prostate cancer or breast cancer or cervical cancer or brain cancer or whatever, you have a lot of possibilities to rewrite the same paper over and over again. So we've seen a paper mill where we found around 600 papers that all looked very similar, but they had tweaked the text a little bit, so it wasn't really plagiarism.
But in order to understand what they promise and get an idea of how they're able to write and publish these papers, I still needed to get them on a call.
Not dialed is currently busy. Please.
Let me try again, that's weird. हेलो
हेलो
हेलो सर आप हेलो सर मेरी आवाज़ आ रही है
हेलो स्पीकिंग फॉर एक्सपर्ट
यस हाँ जी सर मुझे ना एक रिसर्च पेपर लिखवाना था तो उसके रिगार्डिंग इन्फॉर्मेशन चाहिए थी कि क्या प्रोसेस होती है
हाँ जी आपने अपना सब्जेक्ट क्लाउड कंप्यूटिंग बताया था ना CS राइट
हाँ यस सर
तो आपको रिसर्च राइटिंग करवानी है या फिर रिव्यू राइटिंग करवानी है
रिसर्च राइटिंग मतलब इम्प्लीमेंटेशन
अच्छा तो जो भी आपकी सारी रिक्वायरमेंट है राइटिंग से रिलेटेड और जो भी आपका प्राइमरी डेटा और रिजल्ट है वो सारा भेज दीजिएगा
हाँ वो मैं आपको व्हाट्सएप पे इस कॉल के बाद में भेज दूंगी मुझे बस एक चीज़ समझनी थी ये जो पब्लिकेशन की आप मुझे कुछ गारंटी दे सकते हो क्योंकि मैंने कुछ केसेस देख रखे हैं पहले कि 100% गारंटी नहीं होती वो
नहीं आप उसकी टेंशन मत लीजिए हमारी खुद की ये राइटिंग टीम रहती है जो पेपर लिखती है जब आपका पेपर जाता है रिव्यू के लिए तो अगर कोई छोटे मोटे मॉडिफिकेशंस होते हैं तो हमारी टीम ही उसे हैंडल करती है और बाकी हमारे जर्नल्स के साथ भी कोलैबोरेशंस रहते हैं टाइप्स रहते हैं तो जिन जर्नल्स के साथ रहते हैं उनकी हम 100% एक्सेप्टेंस गारंटी लेते हैं कि आपका पेपर हो जाएगा एक्सेप्ट और आपको लेटर ऑफ एक्सेप्टेंस भी मिल जाएगा एडिटर की ईमेल आईडी से
तो आपके पास ये Q1 या Q2 जर्नल है और
अवेलेबल है आपका मिल जाएगा आपको CS में
और इसका प्राइसिंग क्या होगा
CS के चार्जेस थोड़े ज़्यादा रहते हैं आपका 60,000 जो है ये पब्लिकेशन फीस रहेगी और राइटिंग चार्जेस आपके अलग रहते हैं
फिर से बोलो।
आपके पब्लिकेशन चार्जेस जो हैं वो 60,000 रहेंगे और राइटिंग चार्जेस उनसे अलग रहते हैं।
और 60,000 में आप मुझे पूरी गारंटी दे सकते हो ना?
ये सिर्फ आपकी पब्लिकेशन फीस है, राइटिंग चार्जेस अलग रहेंगे, लेकिन आपको गारंटी पूरी है, आपकी एक्सेप्टेंस मिल जाएगी। हाँ
और
हाँ जी
ठीक है, थैंक यू। और एक और बस एक चीज़ पूछनी थी, आप मुझे कुछ अपने पास्ट पब्लिश्ड पेपर्स का प्रूफ भेज सकते हो देखने के लिए, जिससे कि मेरे पास भी कुछ श्योरिटी हो।
इस पर ही भेजना है ना? हाँ, तो मैं आपको एक जर्नल है हमारा के नाम से, जो Q1 स्कोपस जर्नल है, उसमें हमने बहुत सारे आर्टिकल्स भी पब्लिश करे हुए हैं, तो उसका मैं आपको लिंक भेज देता हूँ, आप उसको चेक कर लीजिएगा। मीनवाइल आप अपनी जो भी सारी रिक्वायरमेंट्स है वो सेंड कर दीजिएगा।
ठीक है, थैंक यू सर। और इसका जो पेमेंट होगा 50% पब्लिशिंग के बाद हो सकता है?
नहीं, आपका एक बार आपका टॉपिक कंफर्म हो जाता है तो तब आपको फुल पेमेंट करना रहेगा।
एडवांस में 100%?
हाँ जी, ये हमारे 100% मतलब ये एडवांस ही रहता है, बट आपको गारंटी पूरी मिलती है। हमारे आप बाकी वो भी टेस्टिमोनियल चेक कर सकते हो हमारी वेबसाइट वगैरह पे।
ओके। और कितना टाइम लगेगा पब्लिश करने के लिए मेरा पेपर?
एक बार आपका ये एक्सेप्ट हो जाता है टॉपिक तो 45 to 60 डेज उसमें आपका पब्लिश होता है, गारंटी।
ठीक है, तो मैं आपको व्हाट्सएप पे सारे डिटेल्स भेजती हूँ, आप भी मुझे आपके पब्लिश्ड पेपर्स का सारा प्रूफ भेज दो। और ठीक है सर, आपका नाम?
हम मैम नाम नहीं शेयर करते हैं,
पर आप 100% गारंटी तो दोगे ना पब्लिशिंग की?
आपको पक्का से आपको गारंटी मिलेगी, आप उसकी टेंशन मत लीजिए। हमने बहुत सारे पेपर्स करवाए हैं और सब कुछ आपको प्रॉपर टाइम से मिल जाएगा।
ठीक है, तो फिर मैं आपको मैसेज करती हूँ।
हाँ, ओके,
थैंक यू। Okay, that's crazy. You're telling me I can get a paper published with a few thousand rupees and people can go and read it thinking it's all true? I asked the representative to send me the paper that they had published in the journals as proof. And yeah, they sent it. This is it. It's so weird to think that I can just go and look these up and read them without knowing that there might be anything of value there. But one thing that remained unanswered to me was, how can they guarantee to get my paper published in good journals? They have their own team to write and review the paper, that I understand. But journals have to maintain their own reputation, right? So how are they able to guarantee that? Okay, before we move ahead, I just want to share a quick note about what I'm trying to do here. I didn't realize how serious scientific misconduct was before I started looking into it. And this is a world I've only recently begun to understand myself. But the deeper I went, the harder it's become to ignore. And as this video moves forward, we're going to be looking at organizations, companies, and people that all sit at the center of how modern science operates. And some of these names are incredibly powerful. Powerful enough that even questioning them publicly can become uncomfortable territory. And the reason I'm willing to take a risk like this is because of a story that explains how this system works. And it starts with two names, Omics and Jeffrey Bale. Now, if you have no idea what Omics is, this is how they describe themselves. A publishing group that has organized more than 3,000 conferences and published over 700 open access journals with a network of more than 50,000 scientists, researchers, and editorial board members around the world. Pretty big if you think about how much they have contributed to science and research. And honestly, the core idea behind it is also hard to disagree with, because Omics believes that scientific knowledge should not belong only to elite universities, rich institutions, or people who can afford expensive subscriptions. It shouldn't be restricted and should be accessible to everyone. And that's why they keep it open access. But wait, what is open access? There are broadly two kinds of journals, closed access and open access. If you ever tried reading a paper and hit a paywall like this, That's a closed access journal where the reader pays either through a subscription or through an institution like a university. And because the journal earns money from readers, authors usually don't have to pay to publish their work. And open access journals work differently. The papers are free for anyone to read. But instead of the reader paying, the author pays what's known as an article processing charge or APC. Now, depending on the field, the fees for an author to pay can run into lakhs of rupees. But what was weird to know was, even after journals charging authors such high fees, many researchers still prefer open access. But why?
But the scientific resume really puts a focus on how many papers have you published and how many times have been cited by other papers. So as scientists, we cite each other's work because, you don't do science by yourself. You build on knowledge that other people have done before you.
As Dr. Bick explained, recognition matters in academia. The more people who read your work, the more likely it is to be cited, and the more citations you have, the more recognition you gain. And that is what Omics is about, to promote researchers in science and be a platform to do so. But this is where things start getting complicated, because scientific journals are not just places where knowledge is shared, they're also businesses. And no matter how noble the mission sounds, businesses still need a way to make money. And that is something Jeffrey Bale started noticing in 2008. Now, Bale was a librarian at the University of Colorado in Denver who became one of the earliest and most visible critics of how some publishers were operating. In the late 2000s, Bale began receiving a flood of spam-like notifications from unknown journals and publishers, and these mails often praised him. They invited him to submit papers to join editorial boards for journals that he had never heard of. And that constant noise made him suspicious, so he started looking more closely at the publishers behind them. And what he found was a growing number of journals were using the open access model not as a scholarly service, but as a business opportunity, meaning some publishers were taking fees while offering little or no genuine peer review, weak editorial oversight, and glossy websites that mimicked legitimate journals. So to highlight this, in 2012, Bain created what became known as Bale's List, a blacklist of publishers and journals he considered predatory. And it quickly became one of the most influential resources in academic publishing. For many researchers, librarians, and universities, it also became the easiest way to identify publishers that they should be avoiding. And it was the first time people started using the term predatory publishing after Bale coined it. But in the center of this controversy was one name: Omics. Bale considered Omics as one of the worst offenders in academic publishing. A global parasite is what he called it. In his blog, he accused the company of spamming researchers, charging hefty publishing fees after accepting papers, and using scholars' names without permission to promote conferences. Later in 2016, following up on these allegations, the Federal Trade Commission took Omics to court, accusing it of deceptive publishing practice. And the case ended with the US court ordering Omics to pay $50.1 million in damages. But Bale was not the only one noticing this. Many other researchers also described remarkably similar experiences with other predatory publishers. It often starts with flattering emails and invitations to get involved with journals they had never heard of. And once a publisher got hold of a researcher's name, they didn't always let go. Even after the researcher left, their name could continue appearing in journals without their knowledge or consent. And eventually, all of this got to a point where a few researchers became so frustrated that they decided to see how broken the system really was. So one of them submitted a paper that repeated a single sentence, "Get me off your mailing list," 863 times, with diagrams and everything. And somehow, the paper was still accepted. In another case, a researcher intentionally used auto-type feature to write the abstract of a paper just to see if anybody was actually reviewing it before approval. You can read it here. Atomic physics, and I shall not have the same problem with a separate section for a very long way. Nuclear weapons will not have to come out the same day after a long time, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. This just does not make sense. And this got accepted too. Here is the acceptance mail. Now, this all sounds like a joke, but if you haven't figured out already, predatory publishers are not the only ones benefiting from this system. Companies are benefiting from it too. According to a Bloomberg report, physician and researcher Jeffrey Curtis found a rheumatoid arthritis study published in an omics journal just 2 weeks after submission. And as Curtis put it, companies are often in more of a hurry and are willing to accept lower tier journals because they want a citation. They want someone to be able to reference it and have it be official. And that's exactly why this business is so lucrative.
If you want to make a quick amount of money, you can start a predatory publisher business and you just accept whatever is sent your way. The author will pay you and then you just publish it online.
According to this article, the founder of Omics claimed that most major pharmaceutical companies had worked with them. He also said conferences alone generated around 60% of the company's revenue. It's a billion-dollar industry. And if you look deep enough, it's just based on how much we trust science and the process behind it. But when I got to know Bale's list, I thought it would have solved the problem of fraudulent research. Like he literally handed out a list to avoid these publishers, both for researchers and authors. So that should have worked, right? But it didn't. The list doesn't exist anymore. It was taken down 9 years ago in 2017. And Bale was the one who voluntarily removed it. Why?
Usually predatory journals, right, it is not a black and white thing, right? So you can't say that this journal is predatory or that journal is not predatory. Most of the times it's in the gray area, right? So like what they are trying to do is trying to just keep the balance so that they don't get de-indexed.
When Bale's list was released, it immediately drew criticism because some argued that Bale was too subjective and too suspicious of open access publishing, whereas others believed that he was exposing a problem that universities and publishers both had been ignoring for years. But the controversy was not just academic. Publishers like Omics had money, they had lawyers, and they had a strong incentive to defend their business. And after Bale labeled Omics as predatory, the company publicly threatened him with a $1 billion lawsuit. Can you believe that? And that is when the stakes started getting real, because according to his own opinion piece, he began facing pressure from his university as it started attacking him in several ways. And for that reason, he had to take the list down. But there's a part to his story that kind of bugged me. I don't know if you find it weird, but why did his own university attack him? After all, he was helping them out to blacklist the shady publishers. As I got to know more about why this happened, I started to realize the actual reason predatory publishers and paper mills are able to exploit the system. This is a clip from 3 years ago when Piyush Goyal was celebrating India's rise on the Global Innovation Index, a ranking that measures how well countries turn ideas into innovation. And part of India's rise came from a sharp increase in the number of patents and the research papers that were being produced.
The idea was to create a domestic competition so that they also start doing well in the international rankings. That was the idea. And on paper, this sounds, perfectly well, right? That, hey, we want to do better in international rankings. So let's, develop the domestic competition and get there, right?
Now today, India ranks 3rd in the world for the number of research papers that are being published, behind only China and the United States. And over the years, publications and patents started mattering more and more for India. They mattered for hiring, for promotions, for university rankings, and all with a simple idea that if researchers were rewarded for publishing more papers, they would do more research, they would produce more patents, and they would help India compete on a global scale. And in many ways, it worked. India now ranks 38 on the Global Innovation Index. Around 5% of the world's research papers, they come from India. But as the number of papers went up, so did the pressure to publish them. And the only way to deal with it was fake papers. Today, roughly 20% of all fake retracted papers globally, they're all linked to Indian research publications. For the only reason that publishing stopped being just an academic goal and it became a career requirement instead. And once that happens, the incentive starts to change. The goal is no longer just to do good research. It becomes to produce paper. Achal told me this has a lot to do with how the system itself is designed. Unlike many countries, India still doesn't have a central research integrity office dedicated to investigating these cases. So instead, investigations are often left to the institutions themselves. That's when I finally understood why Bail was facing so much resistance and why he took down his list. Because there's no incentive for the institution to expose fraudulent research. Rather, there's more harm done than good. It's also why so much of this work falls back to independent researchers and science sleuths. People who are not tied to the institutions they are investigating. So I asked them a simple question. What would it actually take to fix this?
Have a central research integrity office. A lot of other countries already have it, so that IIW, whatever work we are doing with zero resources, give some resources, put some people who do the investigation, who have the authority to do the investigation, right? So when we do anything, we firstly expose ourselves to legal risks as well, right? So we have no authority.
And I think what nations can do is to, there can be repercussions, like paper mills can be found and can maybe be prosecuted in the legal system. But yeah, also to have different incentives and focus on quality, because in the end, it's going to hurt your country or your university. If you are caught in all these retractions and scandals, people are going to have a biased opinion about when they see a manuscript from that university or that country. It's something to be very afraid of. And of course, there's even a bigger danger, which I see, is that if we talk about fraud in science, it's easy to sort of extrapolate and say that all science is bad. And I want to stress that is not the case. Like, there's a lot of bad science, but most of scientists are honest, do the best they can. So yeah, there is fraud and we should take care of that. But don't extrapolate, don't think that all science is bad.
At the beginning of this video, I talked about how often we hear phrases like research shows or scientists say. Those words shape what we buy, what we believe, how we vote, and sometimes even how we live our lives. Most of us never see the system underneath those claims. We only see the authority they carry. But after spending the last few weeks inside this world, I don't think the answer is to stop trusting science. If anything, this has made me realize how important scientific integrity actually is. Because science was never supposed to be a collection of papers. It was supposed to be a process we can trust. And protecting that process may be more important today than ever before. I'm Ravina Kamath, and this was your Full Disclosure. If you've been loving the videos we've been creating recently, please like, comment, subscribe. We read all your comments and it means so much to the entire team. So keep watching and we'll see you in the next one.